As you can see, I'm behind the house, and right there is the balcony to the back. This area is very interesting from a geographic standpoint. I mean, this is the back side of the house here, and it comes up right up this little embankment here, but then it goes up into a really high hill. It would be a very difficult task because there's a chain link fence here as well for an individual to commit such a high profile situation and then flee up this area. It's, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I don't know if it's probable. Now, the point of entry, this would be very easy to get into this residence from this from this part of the backyard. Actually, if you look down here as well, it's a little icy, so right down there you'll see the screen laying. And these are some of the back bedrooms. It looks like the scene is frozen in time still. They have it shut down with an officer here.
Oh, okay. So that bottom room, I hit the wrong button here. That's the room that had the cylinder block underneath the window. As you guys remember, where this car is in the driveway, this is the incident that occurred in March of that year, where the young lady, they showed that incident where the young lady had her suitcase removed, items were taken out of it, and then her underwear was found in one of the door panels in her car. Ann, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, especially going back to what you had shown us to kind of orient us to the area, which I really, really appreciate, because I always have to go to a crime scene to get it in my mind, so to speak. And what you see is a perfect opportunity for him to hide in those woods and be able to look into that house.
Really?
And that's why I'd love to know if they found any binoculars, say, when they searched his place, because he could really watch and get himself situated. So my question is, to follow up on Gary's, is did he had the fantasy? I absolutely agree with that. What the prototype, so to speak, but he maybe hadn't found it yet.
Greg, bringing that to a point, you mentioned when you learned that he had set up some cameras for one of his female colleagues or student that he went to college with. Break that down for us. What's your thought process on that? Because you were talking about the extensive voyeurism aspect of this guy.
Yeah, just to go a little beyond on that voyeurism issue, we certainly all agree that he spent time most likely in that backyard watching, peeping. He's a lurker. He's a creeper. He spends a lot of time running around looking for potential opportunities, at least to look and view in voyeuristic activities during that process of targeting specific types of potential victims. I wouldn't be surprised if he certainly spent time in that residence more than on one occasion. And we are also very, very much aware that in certain instances, there are offenders that have gone into these residences and hidden there to monitor what's going on in the living conditions and the interactions, and watching them even as they sleep at night. It wouldn't be surprising to me at all. It's obvious, I think, to all of us that he was very familiar with that residence, the inside of that residence. He knew who was in each room, particularly his primary targets. I think his primary targets were at least one, if not both, of the blondes. And we don't know exactly what the interaction was as he continues to go from the top to through the second and third floor to that top floor. He knows who he's after.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he wasn't watching her, viewing her, and looking, fantasizing at her. To Gary's point on this prototype, I think that one of the things that's a big game changer in this case is social media. We've all talked a lot about the development of the fantasy life, and if we go back and we look at these guys, where were they getting the material to begin to develop that fantasy? I mean, was it BTK's case? I think he was cutting faces out of magazines and then putting those on the flashcards that he was building that were where he was drawing the victims that he was kind of fantasizing about. What we have here in this case, I think, is you have young people who are extremely heavily involved in social media, right? They're out there all the time. So for a guy like this, I mean, he's out there, if it is Bryan, he's out there seeing them out there developing. And I think we did a show here a while back, but we talked about, you want to look, and I think everybody looks and says, well, all these development things that were happening, but if he had the ability to do a lot of things in fantasy through the internet, he could be almost like, if you could imagine somebody on steroids. By the time he comes out and is ready to perpetrate this crime, he has developed much further along in his fantasy life.
It's very interesting. Before, earlier this morning, there happened to be on television the movie Revenge of the Nerds that came out in 1984. Yeah. And part of the plot of that movie is that a group of very nerdy people, kind of, that are getting made fun of and picked on by the popular and attractive people, decide as an act of revenge that they're going to install a camera inside a sorority house, and they sit around kind of, shall we say, arousing themselves, watching these women showering and walking around and all that. And, and then there's even a scene where one of the characters, named is Lewis, hides in the shower. And when the woman nude opens the shower, he pulls out a banana and pretends he's stabbing her, kind of like in Psycho, reverse though, because he's in the shower. And, it's interesting because that kind of fantasy of revenge, I think, is very much at the essence of some of this, sticking a camera in and watching these people in a godlike way that think that they've beaten you, or that you cannot have intimacy with them, and yet you're sharing this whole intimacy with them, and there is no knowledge whatsoever that they know everything about you. The interesting thing is, when we look at the serial killing or these kinds of offenses, because we don't know if this is somebody who's going on to serial killing, we're just making a kind of hypothesis about whoever did this. We think about what is being undone by those crimes, right? So we talk about domination and control and getting power back. But one of the points that I think often gets missed, that comes up a lot when you talk to offenders, is the idea of the instability of their relationships. Fathers that left them, mothers that left them, unpredictableness, and an alcoholic parent that flips out and beats you up or abuses you. So that what you wind up with is people who want an object where they always know where it is. It's predictable. It's with me always, right? There are serial killers that talk about eating people so that they become a permanent part of themselves forever. Or they visit a gravesite because that person will always be there, unless it's Ed Gein or somebody who's digging the body up. The body will always be there. And so that what I think is, there's also a quality of making someone completely predictable, that you have them down to a science and they are yours. And for some of these people, killing the victim is a way of saying, now we're together forever. When you look up the names of the victims of this Idaho murder, you will not be able to see those names without the name of Bryan Kohberger, if he is indeed guilty. They are bound together forever. Where there's one, there's the other. And so that notion of predictability is very important, I think, when we think about what's being asserted in somebody who commits these kinds of offenses. And so that there's a science quality, right? I mean, Greg and Dean, don't you think that's like a studying of a person, wanting to know everything about them? And it's kind of strange. I mean, you imagine if this kind of offender sat down with one of their victims, they would know the most obscure things about them. You know, every day you eat this kind of sandwich at this time, you sit in the park and you do this, you whatever, and the person has no idea that anyone, even the person, even knows they're alive. So, but I so I think that kind of sums up what I'm feeling about what was going through his head.